until I needed to go to college, but because there wasn't AB 540 back then or any opportunity for financial aid, I actually got into San Diego State and I registered for classes. And it was like 2 weeks out for me to come to the dorms, and I realized I couldn't actually attend because I didn't have the money to pay as an international student. So I got held back a year at a community college back in Northern California, Modesto, California, and I was there for a year until I was able to get my green card, and then I came to Cal State Fullerton. So decided to come to Cal State Fullerton, and then I worked here, and a professor here really encouraged me to do a PhD. She really was thinking that, I should do it, and I kind of got, excited about it. But I started thinking, okay, I should probably do a master's first. So I applied to a master's program, all of them outstate. I only applied to like San Diego here for California. And I got into NYU University, and I went there for for a master's in politics. And there I actually fell out of love with the PhD idea. And just realized that academia was, so if you have any questions about that, I'm more happy to talk a little bit more about it. But I realized that for what I wanted to do, it wasn't something that academia wasn't for me. But interestingly enough, my roommate was attending Columbia at the time, and I really liked her program because it was in international affairs and public policy. And that was something that I was very very interested in. And also, she was learning a lot of hard skills. And I realized that I needed that in order for me to really do the kind of work that I wanted to do. So I ended up going there as a second master. So I didn't do a PhD, but I prolonged my graduate school, which was kind of a crazy idea. But I stayed there for 2 additional years, and I got another master's in international affairs and public policy. And my sort of ultimate goal is to really bring educational opportunities. So I love education. I also love women empowerment issues and also humanitarian work. So I would love to eventually take my career to an international level where I work with refugees and immigrants in, just kind of empowering them and kind of helping them in the transitional process, especially what's going on right now with all the refugees. But yeah, that's what's about me. Thank you.
And buenas tardes, good afternoon. I'm Federico Suburbi. Not at Cal State Fullerton as a professor, but I've been a consultant for one of the programs that we have, the Latino Communications Initiative, some years ago. And I'm from Puerto Rico, born and raised there, although I did live in New York, and then went back to Puerto Rico, and from there I got my undergraduate in social sciences, then a master's, and then I went to Wisconsin to get a PhD in communication. There are other stories that go with me, but the main thing is that I persisted, did not give up, and that's what I'm going to share with you, the values of not giving up, whatever your goals may be. And I do have one little thing that I'll say now, I won't have to repeat that later, is that I made it through the doctorate program because of my mom, who, being the only one in her group of brothers and sisters, that was about 12 of them, she was the only one who was divorced and had 2 kids and was taking care of grandma, my brother, and me. And those 2 kids of my mom were the only 2 who went on to get PhDs. And the others are great cousins, I love them all. But they didn't have the incentive from their families, as I had from my mom, to pursue our dreams and our education. And she did it for us, sewing and cooking. So it was that combination of that support from her and the will that I had, and same thing for my brother, to not give up when we established our goals, that I'll be sharing with you, is how that can take you very far if you put yourself to do it. Oh, after my PhD, I've been teaching at the University of California at Santa Barbara, University of Texas, small college in New York, Texas State, Kent State University, and I've been enjoying a year of retirement from teaching, but not from work.
I think you're working harder.
Sometimes that's That's what my family says. Hey, aren't you supposed to be retired? And I said, I still love what I do. 33 years and going and more. I still love what I do, which is research about Latinos and media issues.
Okay, so I'm Henry Puente. I teach at the Department of Communications. I grew up in Azusa. Anybody familiar with Azusa?
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in Azusa. I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school. So I went to Cal State Fullerton as my undergrad, USC for my master's, and the University of Texas, or Federico was like essentially my mentor for the first, 2 years that I was there. University of Texas for my PhD. Classes that I teach here in COM, Entertainment and Society, which is essentially a theory class, Writing for Broadcasting and Film, which is COM 301, Entertainment and Sports, Intro to Entertainment and Tourism, which is COM 346, and every once in a while I teach the capstone class, and I also teach the Race and Media class sometimes. And I guess what I have to share to you guys is just the importance of not giving up is key. But beyond that, I think also what's key is that you have to see yourself finishing. So envisioning the goal and then going, okay, I'm not going to give up. But mentors obviously play an essential role. And my advice to you guys is find yourself a mentor who's not going to give up on you. Because the times will get tough and you're going to want to quit.
Right. This is going to be a great conversation. But we want to know from you. We want to know what we have in the audience. So we want to know whether you are a grad or undergrad, what discipline you're in. And so tell us your name, what program you're in, and tell us what graduate program you're interested in. So those three things: name, what program you're in now, whether it's undergrad or grad, what discipline, and what graduate program, what discipline you're interested in. I would start thinking about questions that you may have for us. If you already thought of one, you can throw it out. If not, we'll have that conversation later. Okay, so start with you, Christy.
Okay, so I'm Christy Somayor, currently finishing up my last semester in the MA in Psychology program. Currently, I'm interested in applying to PhD programs in education or developmental psychology.
And Christy got the pre-doctoral award, which is a scholarship that they give to students to help them apply to PhD programs.
Yes, so a lot of my application fees are waived.
Yeah, so they waived application fees. They gave us $3,000 to travel to universities to get to know professors before she applies. And they gave her money to prepare for the GRE.
Oh no, they gave me the class for free.
They gave her,
Oh, wow.
And
It's
then,
expensive.
and then you can go to a summer program as well, and they give you additional funds, and then the UCs will give you more money, and then they give you another GRE class for free.
yeah. So that's called the Sally Casanova Scholarship, or the pre-doctoral scholarship.
It's open to undergrads and graduate students.
Yeah. So that's the first thing you're writing down today. Sally Casanova Scholarship, and you can go to graduate studies to find out more.
My name is Myra Faisal. I'm getting a master's in electrical engineering. I'm currently in my first semester. I haven't decided in which subject I'm going to get a PhD in yet, but it's definitely a goal.
Right. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Mohammed. I'm from Iraq. I finished my undergrad over there in civil engineering, and at this time I'm doing my master's degree in geotechnical engineering. And after I finish, I will apply for a PhD at the same major. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome.
My name is David Zorkobach. I'm currently finishing up my bachelor's in communications and specifically in advertising. I kind of here just to understand what are the benefits to getting a PhD, because I really don't even know if I want to, but maybe with you guys explaining the benefits to it, I may want to pursue it.
And you're looking at a PhD in communication.
Yes.
How's it going, everyone? My name is George Ortega. Currently not in school. I'm a meat cutter apprentice, but I'm here supporting my girlfriend. Hoping to learn. Maybe I get back into school. I did 2 days of college, and it wasn't for me. So now I'm here, 8 years later, trying to get back in.
Welcome, man.
So my name is Lucero, and I'm currently working on my bachelor's degree in human services. I'm here because I want to learn more about graduate school and what it is, because I have no clue what it is, and also as well with the PhD. But so I started hearing about graduate school recently, so this is something that it's showing up into my plans. So I really want to learn a little bit more about it and see if this is something that I want in my future or not.
Welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Chad Lowe. I'm a current second year Masters of Public Health student. I found out about the LLR Scholars Program through my advisor, Dr. Linda Espinoza. I've been on the fence about wanting to pursue a doctorate. She keeps kind of pushing me towards that or kind of suggesting it. I'm a trauma researcher, so I'm doing my master's research project investigating like crystal meth use and HIV risk amongst the gay community. And so I'm really privileged and blessed to be here. And hopefully if I go back for a doctorate, if I decide to pursue a doctorate, I'll get a doctorate of public health, so a DRPH, and or I'll go down a PhD in counseling psychology route. Just because this past summer, in particular with the shootings at the Pulse shooting in Orlando, that was an attack on 2 very vibrant communities. That kind of really just kind of pushed me towards that direction. All my experience has been in trauma, HIV, AIDS, sexual assault, domestic violence, education prevention. I currently work at a drug and alcohol rehab as a substance abuse counselor, so I'm very like immersed in this kind of work.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Martin Moreno. This is my first semester in the program of cultural anthropology. I received my undergraduate here in psychology. My interests lie with Hispanic culture and education and structures, specifically here in California. I don't know about a PhD yet, but it sounds cool. In terms of, I just get to spend more time studying something that I like, but I don't know where.
My name is Corey Jameson. I'm a master's student in mechanical engineering. I'm kind of on the fence about whether I want to be, where I want to go to get a PhD or not. My focus would be in robotics, so I kind of know what I would want to do, but I don't know if I want to pursue it right there.
Welcome.
I'm Arturo Cortez. My discipline is psychology, and I wanted to do. I'm interested in going to like a counseling program for high school students. But I also want to do. I want to pursue a PhD in education to kind of. I don't know. I had a bad experience with counselors, so. I want to like help out in that area.
My name is Yareli Mendoza, and I am a second-year master's student in public administration. I became interested in pursuing a PhD my first semester in the program. It was just a very interesting semester for me. I had a tough time really just adjusting to graduate school, and my faculty they weren't really supportive. I came and saw Dr. Julian Jeffries right here, and he gave me some really like inspirational like advice that I just walked away and I was like, oh well, I'm not the only one that's really dealing with these issues. And then I became interested in equity, educational equity, and so now I'm looking at programs in education, so local programs, because the Department of Veterans Affairs will be funding me for 3 years if I can get into a program. So yeah, that's why I'm here. I just want to learn more and get some advice about what I should be doing at this point. I've already taken my GRE, contacted professors, and just see what else I should be doing.
So this discipline now you're interested in it is education or
Yes,
higher
education, higher education, educational equity. I'm looking at education programs and administration, or just really anything locally that can take me into my interest in also student veterans and women veterans in higher education.
Hi everyone, my name is Anish. I'm from India. I'm a second year master's student in mechanical engineering. I haven't decided about my PhD program yet, but I'm likely to do so when I hear you. So I'm here now today.
Hi everyone, my name is Luis Vasquez, and geotechnical engineering is pretty much what I'm doing. So it's a branch of civil engineering. I've seen him, yeah. And let's see, what else? My interests. So my interests right now are just to get my master's in engineering and then just keep on working because I need it at work. And then let's see, the future, or to be honest with you, I didn't even know what the meeting was going to be about. I talked to her about coming today. So I actually never considered actually getting my PhD or anything past my master's. So that was my plan, just to get my master's and that's it. So maybe hearing something, perhaps I'm open to suggestions, or I don't know. Life throws a bunch of things to you, so you don't know what's going to happen.
My name is Jasmine Martinez. I'm 2 semesters away from graduating. I'm my master's degree from computer science. I'm looking for some PhD programs in computer science. I don't know specifically what. I have a focus in artificial intelligence, but trying to see what schools are offering like in that field because it's still very general. I'm kind of late in preparing myself to go the PhD route because I'm working full time right now and I'm trying to figure out how to transition into doing a PhD because I don't think that's something I could do part time. So I want to see what the funding aspects of that is.
Glad you're here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Gisela Aguirre, and I'm first generation and the second person to attend the college to graduate. I'm actually an undergrad student. It's my junior year, majoring in sociology, and I just wanted to come here to get as much information as I can get because I'm not quite certain if I want to, but it sounds intriguing, to get a PhD. My sister's thinking about it. My older sister, she's an academic counselor at Fullerton College. And so she's thinking about pursuing her PhD, and so I'm thinking, oh, second person, maybe I could do it. I don't know. I found out about this workshop through them. I met Jose over at Fullerton College, so it's kind of nice that we, crossed paths. Because I really would like to get your advice about going to pursue a PhD. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Nayeli Rodriguez. I am pursuing a bachelor's in communicative disorders. Let's see. I'm interested in going into a master's program for voice rehabilitation, but a lot of my questions have been just like, how do you transition to a master's or a PhD? Like, do you work while you're doing that program? Like, what do you do? Just all that. And I'm really glad I'm here. I know Chad. I'm part of this Allied Health Academy, so they have really been just helping me out on applications and the process and everything. I'm really grateful for them, so I don't have to navigate it on my own. But I also know Dr. Jeffries and Federico, since I went to their Puerto Rico program, and Lucero is here. So I'm really happy I'm here because I get to be with people that I know I can trust their advice, and I can also hear from their colleagues as I get to know the panelists. And I'm really eager to know what it's like, what is the PhD program, what do I expect, and all that. So.
My name is Jose Solano. This is my 3rd semester here. I'm studying political science. My interest in being here is like getting access. How do I get access into a PhD program for political science? I've applied to the McNair Scholarship, which helps in that, but I got denied. And now I've been informed of the Sally Casanova Scholarship, so that's something that I'm thinking of doing, and I guess I'm gonna speak to you maybe for some advice. But yeah, this dream of a PhD is something that has recently like come to me. It was like last year that I decided to pursue a PhD. Prior to that, like I really don't have an education background. I didn't graduate high school until I was 23, and so it's like the more I learn in education, the more I learn about myself, and the more I learn about society. And I want to be somebody who can influence and make changes in society. So that's why I want to pursue a PhD.
Great. I want to remind everybody that Millie and I spent many hours cooking all this great food. So there's food right there. Please grab it. If not, we're gonna have to take it back home. So grab some food. These are great questions that we're gonna go at it for a long time. It's great that we have a lot of disciplines and a lot of different questions. I think I want to start with explaining a little bit what's the difference between a master's and a PhD, and why do a master's and why do a PhD? And I want to warn you, different disciplines, it varies according to different disciplines, right? So for engineering, it's going to look very different than what it looks for in education, or that it might look in psychology or in computer science, right? So we're going to talk generally, but we're going to get the conversation started. So we also recommend that for example, we don't have any engineers here, so for the engineers that you talk to your own faculty about these things too. We're going to get the conversation started, and I can talk more about education, and we can talk about communication, and public policy, but a lot of these questions are discipline specific. So I guess
I'm going to be talking about passion.
Yeah.
About what it takes to get your goals. So it's not discipline specific. So
yeah, that is not discipline specific for sure. But general terms, a master's is something that takes anywhere from a year to 2 years and a half, right? Mostly it takes 2 years. A master's is a full load in a master's program is 2 classes per semester, mostly, sometimes 3. 3 classes per semester. Usually the classes are in the evening because they understand that you'll be doing something during the day, working, so somebody said, how do I navigate working and going to graduate school? It's generally friendlier. I, for example, did most of my master's classes from 4 to 7 in the evening, on 7 to 10, the classes, 3-hour shifts once a week. And so, and then the PhD is a longer investment. A PhD usually takes at least 5 years. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. 8. Usually the time is 5 years, right? And usually in a PhD, you are a big, you're part of the university, meaning when I was doing a PhD, I was actually working for the university doing teaching and doing research at the same time. And we'll talk about funding, but I was fully funded, right? So I didn't pay for my PhD. Actually, Boston College, where I did my PhD, paid me to be there for 5 years doing teaching and research for them, and at the same time I did my PhD. So that's, it depends what deal you get, what deal you negotiate, but there is a possibility that in your PhD for those 5 years you are funded. They pay you to be there. Okay? So I just wanted to start with that. But I do want to get at the question as, of why do, I want to suggest to start us off with the question of why did you do a PhD, or why did you go to graduate school?
May I?
Oh, please.
Chip in on this? I'm the senior guy on this. I've also been graduate advisor, directing master's thesis, dissertations, undergraduate thesis for 33 years, and if I'm going to provide you with one thing to take home, it's that you have to follow whatever your passion is inside of you, not because your mom, your dad tells you to do something or not do something, not because your boyfriend, your girlfriend say do this or do that. It's because you have this drive inside of you for achieving something. When I was an undergraduate, now I'm going to take one step back. From my family, I came in a bit late, but from my family, I had an uncle who was a university professor. So my hangout, because I lived in the same town, my playground was that university, the University of Inter-American University. But it wasn't that was not the decisive factor, because there are many others of my cousins who had that kind of environment with that uncle. At some point, I had an interest in higher education because I wanted to learn something and be different. Use the word be different, achieve something. During my second or third year, probably my second year in college, I had the opportunity to listen to Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Holocaust concentration camps, and he wrote In Search of Meaning, Man's Search for Meaning, a book about what we look for in meaning. So if you ever find that book, Man's Search for Meaning, it might touch a chord in you that whatever you do, a master's, PhD, whatever you find a meaning in your life that will be the guiding light for what you will be doing when you get up in the morning, the next day, the following week, if not at every minute, that's not the case, but you have a sense of purpose for your life. It just so happened for me that I decided to have social change, engaging in positive social change. That was my general meaning. Oh, I wanted, because I had seen injustice, I had traveled, I had done a travel abroad as a high school student to Peru, and I saw the difference in poverty, and then I went back to San Juan, where my family lived in poverty, my mom and dad, my dad was divorced. But my mom, in environment, was poor, but I didn't know it, as a fish doesn't know. It's in water. But then when I saw the contrast in Peru, and then I went to San Juan, where the university was, and then I saw the poverty and the clash of the big rich and whatnot, I said, I want to work for social change. And eventually it became through communication. Once that was set, it was no thinking twice. That's what I wanted to do. So whatever you do, find something that's what you want to do, and find the ways to succeed. There's a lot more that I'm going to share. I'm not going to take all the time talking about my own story, but I wanted to get that part of it because, folks, I've seen students, I've met students who went into something because their mom or dad told them to do so, or didn't go into something because their mom or dad didn't allow them to do so. And neither one of those students, because they did something they didn't want to, or they didn't do something they really want to, are happy. So whatever it is, find that which connects with you. Meditate, go somewhere by the beach, go on a mountain trip. Immerse yourself in knowing you, who and what you are. Because in high school, I had the highest grades in math, algebra, geometry, physics, never chemistry. Failed chemistry, just had to drop out of chemistry. So I was going to be an aeronautical engineer, designing airplanes. Yay, go out in space, whatever it was. So I got to college, and my first two math classes, I practically failed. But I succeeded in the social sciences, especially when this biology teacher said, Federico, you're not going to continue in this natural sciences anymore. I said, no. I think I'm doing better in the social sciences. She says, good, so let me tear up this exam. I'm going to average your grade for the other exam so you can pass and continue in that arena. Wow. So I've done that with my students too. Because I find those who are not good at this, but here they're finding another path for their success. Find your path to your success, which resonates with you, with your life, with what you want to do. Now, I still fly a lot, but it's on American Airlines. Usually someone else's tab, not my own pocket, most of the time, honestly, because of what I do. So that's just the first thing that I want to share, and I'll come back with another round for other things that I want to share with you. But find that which will drive you, that says, this is what, and if you don't know, that's the first thing you must do. Read, go to the library, find books. One of the things I used to do when I started getting into the social sciences, and my main line of sciences was psychology, on humanistic psychology, but other disciplines, I would find a book that I had to read for a class or something that was required, and then I'd see the books on the left, on the right, on the top, on the bottom of that shelf, and read the table of contents. And sometimes I read more than the table of contents, because wow! And that's when I said, this is what I really want to do. And it was in that arena of political communication. And that's my expertise, in addition to a couple of other things, but it was political communication. That's where I'm going to go. Anyway, more on that later.
I just wanted to add something. A lot of times for first generation students, it's very difficult to have that path, or to even, like, you just made it to college and that's good enough. Like, okay, and like, there's not a real sort of path of like, okay, what's next, or, you know, what is my passion? But the passion, and even if oftentimes you don't necessarily have a passion, ask yourselves, what are you curious about? What is it about? Because somehow you're here. So that tells me that you're curious about something, you do love learning, and you're here for a reason. But it's how do you start drafting a plan for you? And whether that plan includes a master's degree or a PhD after your master's or not, right? And also, where do you want to serve? I always think about it from a place of serving, serving something that is bigger than me. And so I guess that's all I wanted to add about first generation students, that it oftentimes, you know, it always feels like that's how I felt. I was like playing catch up and trying to figure things out and trying to navigate, and sometimes other students already have a plan and know what they're going and know the job that they're going to get because they're going to get this master's or PhD. So definitely ask a lot of questions, and I think that's when a mentor really does come into play, because it really helps you to draft this map, and along with your passion or interests.
One thing I'd like to add to that also, sometimes PhD programs are not fully funded, so you have to pay. So one of the questions that you need to ask yourselves, for reals, is like, okay, how much am I going to owe? And, you know, it's going to be worth my while to pay these student loans back, right? And still have enough money left over where I can, you know, exist. So that's kind of a question you really need to ask yourselves too. Sometimes you don't get a fully funded PhD program. So something to bear in mind.
I really like what Federico said about searching for meaning, because for me, why a PhD for me was, to me it seemed like the ideal job to be a professor, right? Because it really fit with what I wanted to do. I worked in an office for a long time, in kind of the corporate world, and I felt sick with a 9-to-5 office thing, you know, staring at a computer. I felt I was being inactive. I thought what I was doing was not important. I was depressed, right? More than anything, I felt that I was like I was just invisible, because I was doing something that wasn't important to me, and I was getting money and I was getting benefits, but I was restless, because it wasn't entertaining. They weren't getting the best out of me, right? And so went into the PhD, and it is a sacrifice. Even though my program was fully funded, I was very poor for 5 years when my family was like, "What are you doing? How many degrees are you gonna get? Right? When are you gonna work?
You're gonna hear that.
Right? When are you gonna get to work? Come on, right? Or get married or something like that. Right? Have kids?" And I was like, "No, books." So I went into it because to me being a professor was the ideal job. And now that I'm a professor, it's turned out to be pretty ideal. Not exactly what I thought. Much more meetings than I wanted to, and much more petty politics than I really wanted. But hey, I can't complain. Why is it ideal? Because first, I love to teach. And as a professor, you're going to teach. And so you're going to have to, people that know don't always, people that know a lot aren't always the best teachers, right? So it's not that you love your discipline. When good teachers don't just love their discipline. They love to teach, right? They love not to get people like Harvard, the people that already know, and show them, teach them a little bit more. I like to work with students like me, the first ones in their family to go to college, which maybe didn't have a good K through 12 experience. And I like to help them and mentor them and, give them additional support so that they, make the best out of their college experience. So I love doing that. And as a professor, you're going to do a lot of that, especially if you're in a Cal State, because we have a lot of first generation college students and non-traditional students and underrepresented students. And you're going to stay with them after hours and after class, and you're going to have to be patient with them, right? So you have to love that to teach. Most PhD programs, some of them prepare you to do just research. So that's one thing, but a lot of them you're going to be teaching, and so you have to love to teach. The other thing, you have to love to do research. To me, research was great, right? Because it's coming up with new stuff, right, that hasn't been done before. Like, you gotta love that, right? Because you're gonna write about something that nobody has written before. Because first you have to do a literature review, and if somebody else did it, you're gonna have to do something different. So, I was undocumented in this country for 14 years, right? And I knew what it meant to be undocumented. So when I was in a school of education, I wrote about the experience of undocumented youth in a high school. People were like, they were pulling their hairs telling me, that's not really a topic. You can't write about that. It's illegal to talk about it, right? And I was like, no, that's what I'm gonna do. And, a lot of people were against it. I had some people that supported me. I did it. And then, now it's publishing like nothing. Like it's everybody wants to, talk about that topic. 10 years ago, not so much, right? But it's published, and, I've been able to, use, that search for meaning. My meaning was to tell people what it means to be undocumented. What are the barriers, right? And I'm doing that. I'm doing that every week in my classes. I go talk to parents. I write about it. I go to conferences and I talk about it. It's great, right? I love to talk about immigration. Now I have a study abroad program in Guadalajara where we go to Guadalajara and we talk to Mexican professors and students there about immigration and their experiences and how it's different, how it's talked about there than here. It's wonderful. I got 3 months in the summer where I don't have to teach and I can do my own thing, right? So to me, that's why, a PhD goes well with my life. I can't do a 9 to 5 routine, right? Every day is different for me. Some days I teach, some days I do research, some days I do meetings, and, sometimes I'm in Puerto Rico doing a study abroad program, I go to conferences, so that to me, I love that. Every 7 years you get a sabbatical. That's like a whole year when you don't have to do anything except to do your research. What's better than that? You get paid for to do it. So that was my, that's why I wanted to do a PhD, right? But if you want to get rich fast, this is not the way to do it, right? Because you don't get paid that much.
Unless you're in engineering and invent that one little thing that no one else has, you patented it, and that's it.
That's it.
So keep that in
Speaking to
mind.
the engineers in the room.
The social scientists and the education folks,
Not so much.
no, not for becoming rich quickly. But
It's good money, not bad.
yeah, it's good money. Relatively speaking, it's good money. But here's the second point, the second major point, in addition to finding who and what you are and having a passion for it, that passion is to learn so much about it. To read and read and read and read everything that's been written about that topic, whatever it is. And you don't have to get a PhD to do that. You don't have to get a master's degree to do that. Because you have a passion for learning about the children's response to TV shows, about how adults react to trauma. You could just immerse yourself and you do the reading. When you're in a master's program or a PhD, that reading is guided by subtopics and sub-subtopics, and then your specialty in which you do engage in learning and doing the research that others have done, partially done, not done, and then you immerse yourself, and the master's is mastering the literature. That's what a master's is. You have to write some thesis, but mastering the knowledge of that field. That's what a master's is, and a PhD is more mastery of the knowledge of the field, plus showing that you can do the research on your own. That's what a PhD is. You learn, you show how much you learn about that topic, and the subtopics, A, B, C, D, whatever those subtopics are, you've read so much about it, systematically taken notes, that you know the dates of the studies, the authors, the publishers, whether the study is successful, what's missing, what not. And then the PhD, you said, hey, and I've learned enough that I'm going to do this study. I'm going to look at these questions. I'm going to answer those questions by doing field work, experiments, lab studies, inventing things. And this is my showing you that I have that highest level knowledge of it. Hey, congratulations, you've just earned a PhD. I made it very simple. But of course, it's years of reading and systematic application to what are the questions that haven't been answered? How can I answer that? If it's your passion, then you really engage in it because you really want to know it. If you're doing it because someone else is telling you to do, oh my God, do I have to go to the library again today? This is boring. I don't want to do that. I don't care about what those other people read. But if it's your quest for that knowledge, you're going to be eager to get up the next day to do more readings. And that's a connection that follows. One other point, and still I have so much more to share, but of course I'm not going to monopolize this, it's that there is academic PhDs in which you go into teaching because you're going to be hired by a university. And then there's these top-of-the-line corporations that need PhDs because they are the ones inventing, doing things, think tanks that need people with your expertise. Some folks are going to go into the academic PhDs. Why? Because you have the greatest autonomy and flexibility of time. You teach 2, 3, 4 courses, depending on where you end up. At the Cal State system, 4 courses a year. At the University of... Per semester. At the University of California at Santa Barbara, and at the University of Texas, I was teaching 1 graduate, 1 undergraduate per semester. And if I had research, I taught 1 class. My last job, I taught 1 day a week. Afternoon and evening. The rest of the week was mine to decide what I wanted to research and write about. You get the professional line PhDs, you're going to be working 9 to 5, 9 to 11, 12 hours, 14 hours a day, making a lot more money than the academics, but you better love what you're doing. And your soul is sold to the corporation that hires you. Whereas in academics, you've decided what you want to teach, what you want to engage in teaching others about what you learned. Big difference. Okay?
I also wanted to, yes, I have a question.
Yeah, she has something to say. Or
okay,
But
yeah.
we had a question there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like just to clarify to see if I'm understanding because, right, and it's in regards to the reading. I enjoy the reading, right? Like I'm passionate because I'm learning so much, but I feel like right now there's just no time for it because I got different classes. I gotta work. I got family. Other just responsibilities that require my time. So when you're at that PhD level or you're going towards that, is there more flexibility towards that reading, or is it more stressful? Does it take more managing? And do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do.
You want me to answer?
Let's start.
Well, at least in communications, the amount of reading was immense. So, what are you
Political science.
Political science. I'm guessing that at least in the beginning, you're gonna have to really they're gonna throw a lot of reading at you, especially your first year, I would imagine. A lot of theory, and so really what it is sort of like, I call it active reading, not just highlighting stuff, but actively engaging with the text as you're reading through it. And that way you could learn stuff, you could read more stuff faster and still absorb it. So that's something you really have to sort of master, I think, in your first year, because you're gonna get a lot, well, at least we got a lot of information during our first year as a PhD student.
In any discipline and in any reading, anybody taking speed reading? Nobody's taking, you're taking speed reading. There's certain skills of what you look for in any reading. You're gonna have to read full texts at times, full books. But even when you do, and you're saying, what do I have to remember from this? What were the research questions that the author was presenting? What were the questions that he or she was seeking to answer? Are they explicit, or do you have to guess what they were? But most of the time, they should be. If they're good writing, they're explicit. The purpose of the study was to answer these questions. Okay, that you should focus on. What methods were used to answer those questions? What data were sought to answer those questions? And then what were the key findings? So there's tons of readings, but if you're focusing on trying to get that bit of information, a lot of the surrounding stuff is just showing what others have done and their critiques and a lot of filling in, whatever. It just facilitates. But yes, there's a lot of time that you must dedicate to reading, and then it's a matter of establishing a strong personal routine of life. Another lesson. We are very used to, and especially if you are working already when you're doing your graduate studies, you get very used to earning that paycheck every week, every 2 weeks, every month, and going out and buying those brand new shoes, that skirt, that jacket, the car, the whatever it is.
Yep.
Boy, do we want to continue doing that.
Yeah.
Why not? Why? That's why I work for. That's why I spend all this. Then comes the time when you have to balance, and if you have kids, it's even more challenging. I had still have a wonderful wife who took a lot of the responsibilities of the day-to-day care with our daughter, now 30-something years old. But I was given that support for allowing my focus time on my reading and my research. My mom came from Puerto Rico to visit us at Wisconsin at times. She would spend 3-4 months with us and then say, okay, you're on your own now. Go back to the warmth of Puerto Rico, and I've done enough. But it was establishing, what I'm getting to here, is establishing a support system if you have a family. You must establish a support system and not expect to have to do that everything on your own. You have the neighbors with whom you share the babysitting, the daycare, the whatever it is. Establish that network of trusted people, because otherwise on your own, unless you're really super smart and whatever it is, it's going to be very difficult if you have family. If you're on your own, then it is indispensable that you do 3 things to take care of your life. Number 1 is meditate, and I mean it. Even if it's 5 minutes sitting on the sofa, breathing, deep breathing, even if it's 5 minutes and saying, the purpose of my day is 1, 2, 3. So that inner taking care of, that you exercise. Even if it's a 10-minute walk, a 15-minute walk, folks. I was playing soccer with my grandson who's 7 years old. I hurt my knee last Friday. But otherwise, I will jog and walk and run an hour a day, even when I was working. Sometimes when I didn't, it was awful. That meditation and that exercise are the juices, the energy that allows you to say, I'm going to read for the next 3 hours. If you don't have that, you'll sit down and read and you'll fall asleep. If you haven't meditated, if you haven't got the body in motion. Oh, should I add good diet? I'll assume that you know that. If not, find out. Because there's certain things that in your diet that will make you fall asleep. I didn't find out until I was already a professor that wheat, and I used to love this whole wheat bread and the cinnamon buns and whatever it was, I would eat that and it was like taking a sleeping pill. So I would get to those faculty meetings and I'd be dozing off and my colleague would say, what's wrong with him? What's he taking in? And it was just the wheat. But that was my finding out that my body does that when I have wheat, which I still consume, but at a different level. Now I have green tea and yogurt and whatever, boring stuff. But boy, at 67, I feel pretty healthy. Be taking care of your mind, taking care of your body, and then having a routine in which you do not break that routine of every day at least X amount of time dedicated to that goal, no matter what. You will not do anything else. And here, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long to say this, but neither a PhD, nor a term paper, nor a dissertation, nor a master's thesis is a jigsaw puzzle. Anybody who's not done jigsaw puzzle? We've all done jigsaw puzzles. Has any one of you ever done a jigsaw puzzle in which you start by the quarter piece here and you do nothing else until you find the piece next to it? Have you ever done that? You don't do anything else until you find that piece. You don't put any others together? Is there someone who's saying yes? Well, that's not the way to do theses or jigsaw puzzles. What you do is you try to find the ones that are kind of like the frame. And then you start saying, oh, here's some reds. Let me see how many of those fit. And there's some greens and then some yellows and whatever. There's a water pattern. Here's some snow. There's a cat. There's whatever it is. And you kind of do those little pieces. And voila, before you know it, they've all merged together. If you start doing a thesis or a dissertation or a term paper that's linear, when you do not find that piece, it'll be a long time before you find it in the mix of everything else. But if you dedicate this time, okay, I can't do that, I'm blocked. I'm not going to do that one. But let me find these other ones. It flows, it releases your blocked energy. And if you've done everything you can and you can't find the pieces, go jog, go walk. Go to the ocean, spend a minute. I'm a rower. I haven't been rowing for a while. But I finished my book years ago. And I remember that I'm rowing in the middle of the lake over in Austin. And it was in that moment that I said, aha! So I took the time from sitting on my desk block, and I went and rowed. Or I could have been jogging. I could have been meditating. I could have been watching the moon or the stars. And it kind of like it happens then. So those are just bits of advice and more to come.
I would like to address the master's program from a perspective of a woman also and family expectation, especially because I went through it myself, and also I also wanted to address the amount of work. Why I chose graduate school, I actually worked for about 3 years after my undergraduate program. And the reason I went into graduate school was because I was really interested in working with immigrant families. I got really into community development and looking at how can we, my ticket to a better life was truly higher education. I mean, I was very poor. I was, raised by a single mom, and we were homeless for a while. So I knew what it was for me. Having an education gave me a whole new life, a whole new access to so many things. So for me, I always knew that that was a ticket for many of us, right? For many immigrants, but also for those who, live in other poor countries. So I went to graduate school for those reasons. I was working as a health educator in communities, and I realized that in order for me to move up and kind of do more like director positions and actually have more say into developing these programs for these people, I needed to have a master's program. So it was a very conscious decision. What I do want to encourage, especially women, is that dream big. I mean, for those who are not in the graduate program right now but are kind of thinking about it, I would say don't just look around you locally. Like, really do think about other programs outside California, because oftentimes, especially in the East Coast, you will get a program funded. And to get a program funded as a master's program is actually very difficult. You have to pay for most of your graduate work. I mean, master's programs, you do have to pay for them or get into debt. You get loans for those. So I decided, and also when you're applying to whether it's a PhD or a graduate program, do find those programs for first-generation students that are going to help you apply. So they're going to waive your applications. They're going to help you with the GRE. There are those programs out there. So definitely do come back to us and talk to us about, because even if I don't know, I'm more than happy to help you research those programs. So that's very important. Now, the minute you decide to go into graduate school, find help. Don't just do it alone, especially because you have to pay some money to apply to a few schools. And consider schools outside the state, and also who is going to fund you, who's going to give you the most money, because it is expensive. The program that I chose was NYU, and both my programs at NYU and Columbia were very, very expensive, and also were full-time programs, so I was not allowed to work. And when I told that to my parents, I was helping them. I bought a house for my parents, and I was actually giving them $1,000 for mortgage. And when I came to them and talked to them, it was a hit. It was a real hit. We ended up losing that home actually due to the economic crisis, not necessarily because I went to grad school. But those are real things that happen in the process of me being in graduate school. And so when the economic crisis hit and the mortgage just went up to the roof, my dad couldn't pay no more, and I considered dropping out. And so that's something that I actually never really shared. And it was a very difficult process, and because I was living in New York City, and New York City is a very expensive city. So as a woman as well, people will question a lot, like, why do you have to leave far from the family? When are you gonna get married? I'm 37 years old. I got married older, a lot older, and I don't have children. So it's very weird for my family. In fact, when I announced that I was engaged, they're like, oh my God, we had given up on you. Like, we never thought you were gonna get married. They question your sexuality. They question so many things because you've chosen school. And so that's a real thing. And I want women to really understand that this is and for everyone here, and for all of us here, it's a very personal decision. At the end of the day, what you choose to do, whether it's work after your undergraduate or whatever it is, it's a personal decision, because this is your journey, and it is so personal, and it's so on you that no one's gonna be there when you have to read 300 pages, a week, and it's
a week,
and probably not even.
One day
I'm
to
sorry,
the next.
yeah.
Like one day.
No, because and that's another thing I wanted to address. When I got to NYU, that was a big slap in the face. I mean, it was so rigorous. Like, I remember I went to one class and it had like 8 books, and we had to read like 2 books by the next time we met. And I was like, how does people do this? Like, it was really, really, difficult. But then you really learn exactly the suggestions that, Federico saying, you really have to get good with strategy and like how to read and understanding what you're reading things, you know, and developing your own knowledge and developing your own sort of opinions about things. Because when you go into classes, they're not like undergraduate classes; they're like seminars like this, and you have to really talk about what you've learned. And sometimes you also argue against the author, and you say, "Well, that's not how I feel. This is what I think," you know. So those are you're constructing knowledge, and if you are going to construct knowledge, you are going to have to read a lot. And I think priorities are very important. So I ask you all to really, that's the questions I ask myself. I chose a program where I couldn't work. I had to speak to my family. And then also, if you don't have families, that's kind of where you're at. If you are married and if you have children, then I would consider something different. But understand that like your PhD or your graduate program also has to fit into your own priorities, because you're gonna quit. It's so difficult to try to serve so many important things at once. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. And then also I'm happy I work here as a program coordinator with working with first generation, you know, graduate students, and I'm always here to answer any questions that you have on whether you want to pursue a PhD or graduate school. But I will say one more thing. You have to, PhDs, it's also very personal. You have to get very obsessive about the topic. I mean, it's got to be something that you're like, I dream about this. This is my thing. I mean, you become so obsessive, you have to go do a PhD. If you're not, then I would, you know, again, ask yourselves a lot of questions, because this is a very personal journey that will feel very isolated at times, and that you have to build your tribe to continue to move forward.
You know, I know that both these folks are going to be here. All three of them are going to be here for you any day, and I'm just here this moment.
Yeah. So you take.
So if I say too much or you have questions, intervene. Like this. Question. Yeah.
I just wanted to know what, during that hard time where, you know, you were debating whether go and support your family or stay, what did it for you to?
So I have a grandmother who said to me, you know, Millie, and I remember this so well. She goes, I gave you wings. It was really hard for me to let you go. I can't let you come back. And we're gonna do what it needs to do. We need to do. And I remember my now husband. At the time, I was dating him, and it was a long distance relationship. And he actually signed for my loans, because we were losing the home, so I wasn't gonna get any loans. And he signed for my loans for me to get financial aid. And he offered to actually pay my parents' mortgage for 2 months, which is why I married the guy. I mean, he's amazing. He's a blessing in my life. But I will say this, like, there will be people, and my mom, it was really my mom who said, when you left, you left because you had a dream, and you're not coming back without it. You're not coming back without fulfilling that dream, even if it means that we all take sacrifices and that we all help you. And so my mom is disabled too, so she couldn't work. My dad came back in the picture, and he helped a lot, but it was very difficult. It was a very difficult decision, because it made me feel very guilty, and it made me feel very, you know, like, who am I to do this and not, right? But I'm very glad I did, because again, everything you do now is gonna help out not just you, but your family. You know, now I'm able to help my parents with their mortgage. Now I'm able to help them out, and so also choose wisely. You know, I know, and Juliana's probably gonna laugh at me, because I always bring relationships into the talks that I have, but that's meaningful. Your relationships are going to determine a lot of how you move forward in your life, and also how happy or how supported you feel. And so always choose someone, not only friends, but, you know, significant others, that are going to respect your dream and are gonna support it and are gonna help you get through it, because it really does get difficult. I went to very privileged schools myself, and I kid you not, it was the hardest thing for me, because I had never been exposed to that much wealth, to people that have been breeded to. When I talk about a plan, I didn't know. In fact, I didn't even know my plan after graduate school. And they knew they were gonna go end up in Wall Street. They knew they're gonna go, you know, end up in the UN or the World Bank. They were breeded to do that. and I wasn't. I always felt like I needed to catch up. I didn't know how to draft that plan. And you know, somebody said I'm late. I don't know who said here in the audience, you're not late. You're never late. You know, it might take us a little bit longer, but you're never late because you're where you need to be, and you're learning. You don't know what you don't know, and it's taking me a lot to forgive myself for that, because I always felt like I was behind. I was catching up, and now I know that I don't know, and it's okay because I'm gonna figure it out, and I'm surrounded by the right people to help me get through that.
Now that is a just a beautiful statement. That again, I'm going to read. There's a segue right here. My mom, I mentioned, was the only one of 12 brothers and sisters who was divorced, and I'm glad. I love my dad, but I'm glad they were divorced. So she was taking care of my grandmother because she was the one who was single, so she could take care of the grandmother, of her mother, and my brother and me. So when we graduated from high school, all those 12 brothers and sisters say, well, now it's time to work to help your mom. She's been working for you. And my brother and I got admitted to college, and she says, no, they got to college. We're not going to support them. So we finished our bachelor's, and those brothers and sisters of my mom, my aunts and uncles keep saying, now you really got to get to work and help her. And just know, as long as I can work, I'm going to help them. Finished a master's, and we're on to a PhD, and how come you're not working to help your mom? And, well, because we're studying. You got scholarships, and I'll say something about connections for scholarships. So we graduate. Now we're both PhDs, and we start taking our mom to our world travels wherever we go, and those aunts and uncles are saying, los hijos de Doña Santita, que buenos son. How those children of Doña Santita, look how proud they are. And she passed away many years ago, but it was that sense of, wow. And my mom was a seamstress, and she would cook, and that's how she made money for her and for us. All those years until we got it. Now, of course, when we were making some money, we would help her. One important detail about where you go for your doctorates or your master's, some of you, find a school that has what you want to do, that has professors who are doing what you want to do, and if you can, find them in a place that has few minorities. Because those institutions, as was the case for the University of Wisconsin, to have a Puertorriqueño was loud. Whoa, we got someone who's a Hispanic over here. We've got money for those folks because we don't have many. We want to diversify. And my graduate school was also subsidized for the most part, but not all of it. My master's was paid out of pocket with scholarship money that I had here and there. But it was connecting at a school, and I tell my students many times, find a university, Iowa, Nebraska, whatever, that has a great professor who can mentor you and will have scholarships, because there are people who want to give money for diversifying educational opportunities. If you're into communication, Texas is not the best place to get funding.
No.
Henry no. He was nice. No, not Texas, not Austin for a master's or a PhD. Masters, no funding. PhDs, if you're really outstanding in some areas, and even then, not necessarily. But Iowa and Wisconsin can stand the cold. May be the place for you for engineering or other disciplines. But the most important part, once you're interested in a school, write to the professor even before you apply to the program. Dear Professor so-and-so, I saw that you are an expert in this field. That's my interest for the future. May I have a conversation with you sometime soon to see if you can give me some guidance? If that professor answers, and that answers in a nice way, you've got an open door. If you never hear a reply from that person, try again, because he or she may not have received your email or got it lost in some backlog. You can even call, but that's one way to find out, to get the match, and you will know from that first conversation and other conversations, who of those professors that you reached out to will be the right ones, and then the connection for you. The fundings are limited, but if you are in certain fields, the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program is one of the very best for pre-doctoral and doctoral dissertation and postdoc. Postdoc is down the line. But they'll even fund you through your master's so that you go into the PhD. The caveat for that is that you are going to dedicate part of your work to help diversify the field, to diversify your field. So it's not just, if you're going to be a lawyer, if you want to study law, no one here said they're going to study law, or they just want to be a professional for, I'm afraid to say it, but Monsanto, hopefully no. But if that's what you want to do, the Ford Foundation is not going to support you. But if you want to do engineering, to do something innovative, creative, that might help diversify the teaching and the education, then if you have the records and the support and what other factors come into play, the Ford Foundation is one of those that is outstanding for the best scholarships ever. So those are options to consider as you go along.
We want to hear from you.
Yeah, question.
I'm looking for all of your advice for international students because we are in a limited area. We cannot work. Another thing, our language is not good, so we cannot get GRE almost. Like, it's difficult to get. I do it 2 times, but I am in the same area. I'm not American.
What's your field?
Mechanical engineer.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing my master degree right now. This is my last semester, and I'm looking for PhD. I tried like many times. Applied many times. Applied for many jobs, inside school and outside school. I got opportunity with Spartan College. They test me. I passed the test, and they know I'm not American. I have not working permit. They say we are sorry. So what's your advice for international student, especially what you read? Like I'm doing my undergraduate, I'm doing my graduate without working. That's not worth it because I need to relate what I'm reading with the real life, with the real work. I taught back home. I work like a teacher back home in my country, but my country.
Which is?
Iraq.
Iraq.
But there is a crisis and a big war, and my country is not developed like United States. So getting work here is more worthy for us, but there is no chance for us. We are limited. So, what's your advice for the international students, especially for us, especially for the people from these countries who they don't have a lot of experience? There is not development. There is no manufacturers there. Everything is.
Thank you for your question. I was an international student throughout my undergrad, master's, and PhD. Kind of. I was undocumented at points and as an international student in the university at points too. Are you after your master's, are you trying to get a job or go into a PhD?
For me, it's my dream to get a PhD because I love to finish my PhD at like minimum age.
So you can get a student visa to do your PhD, right?
Yeah, but
and the student visa allows you to do 20 hours of work during the semester, 20 hours per week during the semester, right?
Just at campus, we cannot work
On
outside.
campus.
Yeah.
yeah, we cannot work outside. That's the problem.
Right. Yes, I know that. So when you're looking for a PhD, you have that experience in your master's, so the ideal thing for you is to get a job on campus that's related to your discipline, right? And that might be difficult in a master's, but in a PhD, you're going to try to do the same, and in a PhD, that you're going to try to be working for a professor, doing research with a professor that is, being a research assistant or a teaching assistant for a professor that, where you're going to be working in your discipline, right? And you also have to go to the international programs you get special working visas after you've completed your master's. So for example, there's something called optional practical training.
It's just for F1 student. We can.
F1.
Are you not an F1 student?
No, we are J1.
Oh, okay,
okay,
yeah. You still have an I-20, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because, I don't want to interrupt you.
It's not
Because
I-20,
there's
it's DS.
DS.
2019.
DS19.
Oh, okay, yeah, because you're from Iraq. Because
Yeah.
I think there are some restrictions too.
So
Who are the professors who, anywhere in the United States or anywhere else,
Thank you.
are experts in what you'd like to be an expert in?
what?
Who are the professors?
Yeah.
And where are those professors who are the experts in the field that you want to be an expert?
So what he's asking you is that, have you done any research looking for professors at other universities that
Actually,
you are
right
interested?
now my thesis is about sustainable buildings.
About?
Okay, sustainable buildings.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have two more ideas about I already sent an email to Michigan State about that, and I have another idea. It's Southside Army Air Plant. It's working two jobs in the same time, and give the feedback for the soldiers and working as a rocket in emergency situation. So I keep sending, but no one responds, especially when they know I have no GRE and I'm international student. And the GRE is the most difficult part for me. I'm good in math, but I'm not good in language, especially, you see my speaking. But when the professor talks, when I read or when I do something, I'm good. But with the speaking or something,
I work with international students, so I can give you just a couple cents of, especially because there are some restrictions with visa in different countries. Your country does happen to be one of them, but I wouldn't let that discourage you. What I will say is, you are granted an OPT, even if you're our OPT is only for F1 students. I believe OPTs are for everybody.
just for F1.
Only for F1.
Yeah. I'm talking to a search everywhere.
Yeah, okay, because I know that right now your biggest barrier would be the GRE, and if there's, I would also consider, I know this is crazy, but countries like Canada, they're becoming very, also providing a lot of opportunities for our students in Iran, Iraq, the Middle East, and especially in areas like engineering. I would encourage you to look elsewhere, not just focus in the US. For now, if you get some type of internship, because what I would suggest is that you buy some time. You need a type of internship that you can have some time to study for the GRE, because you do need to get the GRE, especially for PhDs and things like that.
At some universities, Vanderbilt is one of those, where that is no longer the main factor, and in fact, in some universities, the GRE is being replaced with grit. The demonstration that you have overcome problems in life and have succeeded by perseverance. This is a new way of assessing graduate student applicants at a number of universities across the country. You'd have to do the search to find out which ones. But if you look at I can't remember now which is one of the main, I think it's Nature or some major magazine, there is a Haitian student who was denied admission in other universities, but at Vanderbilt was admitted, and her science in astrophysics discovered how to tell the differences between stars by their sound based on wavelengths. And that major piece came out in, I can't remember now the magazine, but it's one of those stories that allowed Vanderbilt, among other universities now, to say what we are looking for is not so much the GRE, as much as it is demonstration of overcoming obstacles and succeeding throughout life. And they have questionnaires to assess that. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I wanted to add about the GRE. I got a bad GRE score. I didn't grow up in the United States. The GRE doesn't measure much.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, and I went to, when I got into my PhD after doing my GRE, I know because my professors told me you nearly didn't get in because your GRE was so low.
Same
Alright?
here.
And the other 11 people in my cohort all had very high GREs. Now it's been 10 years since that. And there's only, out of that cohort, there's only 2 professors working in a university. I'm one of them. So I'm, to the GRE, I was like, the GRE doesn't measure much. So you have to look for an educational institution that honors that. And they are out there.
That's a great advice. And do come talk to us after. But I think that's a great advice. I would go that route.
And for all of you, if a PhD or a master's program asks for a GRE, do it. If you don't get a good score, send the score anyway and work on the rest of your application, your statement of purpose, the grades that you have, the recommendations that you're gonna have, right? Because if you, when you go into a school, they're gonna look at the whole of you, not just some standardized test, which is out of fashion, right?
Some universities, yes. Others, no.
Others,
Avoid
no.
those. Others.
Avoid those, yeah. Did you have something?
I just want to say something. If you do have to take the GRE, which is a pain in the butt, and if you get financial aid, there is a fee reduction for it, but no one really ever uses it.
Okay.
So I know how to find it. It's a paper one. That's why no one ever uses it, and it takes like 30 days, but it cuts off almost half the cost.
Okay, that's it. Let's talk to Henry about that. Does that apply to international students?
I'm not sure. I can look, but I know if you get any type of financial, you need certain letters. They maybe will have one from the school that would require it. It cuts off almost half.
Definitely keep in touch with us because I know there's some other universities. We were trying to do this for a while and thought we had GRE books in the center. Maybe this is something we want to look into later, launch a GRE prep course here for free for you guys.
The statement of purpose is key, guys. It really is important that you spend a lot of time and a lot of energy on writing a very, very explicit and key, kind of like laying out who you are, but also what your goals are in your statement of purpose. It is key. And explain, why you didn't do so well, perhaps in your GRE. Your letters of recommendation are also very good. Get good letters of recommendation of people who know you and are going to speak highly of you. And that is key. Yes.
Any professors, correct?
Or just, when I personally got, because I had a kind of an extensive working background, I had actually people who had worked with me, professionals, who could vouch for me, but also professors as well. But you want to get a good lump, well, at least 3 or 4, at least, of good letters of recommendation. And I can't reiterate how the importance of writing an excellent statement of purpose with no typos, grammatically perfect, as perfect as you can make it. It just makes you
get
sound
the help
polished.
from her office to do that.
Yeah. Yes. And you don't have to do it alone. The Career Center, they can help you write your CV and your letter of purpose. And thank you, Henry, for bringing up recommendations. Because if you're an undergrad now planning to apply for graduate school, or if you're a master's student planning to apply for a PhD, if I had you one-on-one, I would ask you, who are the 3 people that are going to write your letter of recommendation? And I write a lot of letters of recommendation. I'm not going to write a letter for you if this is the first time I see you in my office asking me for a letter of recommendation, right? So you're going to see that professor in their office hours, 6 months in a row before you ask them for a letter of recommendation. You're going to go, you're going to talk, you're going to maybe even work with them, you're going to offer to do some research with them. Maybe you've been at a conference where you know him, you or her, and So you have to develop that relationship before you ask that question of, would you write me a letter of recommendation? You have to do well in their classes, of course. You know, because they're not gonna lie, they're not gonna say they gave you an A if you got a C minus, right? So you have to be strategic, right? You have to start thinking, who are the 3 people that are gonna write a letter of recommendation that they know me, they know my passion, they know my situation, right? They could write about your visa situation, they could write about why you haven't done well in the GRE, but you still have a lot of potential, right? Those things are gonna ameliorate the lower parts of your application.
But let me go back to you have a question, and I'll be right there on that. The statement of purpose, having been graduate advisor, director of graduate studies at the department where Henry got his degree, I had 4 years of reading and being in charge of more than 400 applications for what may have been maybe 15 positions, 15 slots open, 20 depending on the year. You can have the greatest statement of purpose, but it doesn't match what we do at the school. Bye, next. That statement of purpose has to say why you want to study there for the topics that the professors so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so are the experts in, and that's what you want to do. You don't match that. You have a generic statement of purpose. I want to be the best engineer. I want to be the best sociologist in the world. Well, why here? Why at the place where you're applying? Well, because there's the studies of so-and-so. His book was an inspiration for me. I read his work. I want to follow that research. Aha! Here we have someone who, that professor, may be bringing in to be the research assistant. Otherwise, it's a mismatch. And the same thing goes for that letter of recommendation. When that professor who knows you takes the trouble of writing the letter and says, so-and-so, the purpose of this letter, I recommend so-and-so because he or she has got A's in my class and he'll do well in your school. Versus a letter that says, I know the student's work, he would be or she would be an ideal candidate for your program because what he or she wants to do is what you do or whatever that is. You have had that conversation with that professor who might be writing the letter. That rings a bell. It stands above the rest of those 400 applications because there's a match and increases the probabilities that your statement of purpose, confirmed by the letters of recommendation, say this is a better match than all those others who may be high GREs, whatever it is, but don't match what we do and what we do, what we're looking for the people who come here. Just another tidbits of advice.
And when you do ask for a letter of recommendation, bring your CV already. So give them a little package. So bring your CV and perhaps a little bit about yourself.
The statement of purpose that you're drafting.
And if you already have that draft,
just a draft.
Yes, exactly.
Ask for feedback on that draft.
Yeah, because for me, I would say that in all honesty, you guys, my GRE scores were really low, and I got into really tough schools. It was all because of my letters of recommendation. I mean, I cried when I read the letter of recommendation that my professor wrote. And it was my statement of purpose. Because they all, and I had, you know, and again, so the relationship that I have with my professor, Dr. Simone, she's former professor here. I had a relationship with a year, and really the way it happened was because I was so interested in her research that I would be at her office hours. I was so annoying probably. Because sometimes she would be like, okay, Millie, it's time for my nap, because she was older, a lot older. And I would be like, okay, but like, it really, she offered, she said, you know, when are you applying? I want to write you a letter. So do invest. I cannot reiterate this anymore. Like, invest in your professors, especially professors who are sitting here. They want to hear about
Buy
you.
me a drink.
Exactly.
No, just kidding.
But you could go get even a drink with your if you're a graduate student.
Oh, it's scratch. I did not mean that. I'm a better human being than
you are. But I would say foster those relationships.
Yes.
And I do have for me, international students are very dear to my heart because I work with them, and I was an international student when I studied abroad. And I would say please don't think that because you're an international student, it's not going to happen for you. You just kind of have to get a little more proactive and talk to professors, especially yours at your program, but also anyone who's willing to listen and to say, hey, this is a connection, network, you guys, network. And I will say, if anyone at the Ivy League schools or whatever, that's what they do good. They network. And here, it's really difficult, especially sometimes, I don't know if it's culture, but it's really hard for us to go and talk about our problems or stories or to other people. And so professors, and because we're embarrassed or we feel like, oh my God, they don't want to hear it. They do. And whoever does it, then you'll learn not to go back. But, open up a little bit more about your situation. So you'll find people that want to help.
I think that was like a really great segue into like the question I have. I graduated from UCI with my bachelor's of arts in public health policy, and I always heard from like my friends who were in grad school that it's going to be very rigorous and time consuming. And I think like one issue that I struggle with, and I want to seek your counsel, is I never expected to kind of hit the mental health like issues or like that I did, especially navigating the ivory tower as a student of color, as a first generation student of color. In institutions that historically were not made for you and those like you. That's like one thing last year, because I came in now super gung ho. I was like, I'm gonna go straight for a doctorate. This is what I'm gonna do. This is who I want to work with. I was had the whole map out, and that's one thing I guess I wasn't anticipating for. And just a plug for anyone who's like needs it, the counseling center is free for students that have access to that as well. But I always like to kind of gauge and ask professors or people who did it, like, how did you navigate that? Because being in public health, you look at populations and health disparities, and one of my colleagues, she's looking into depression in graduate students in that population, and the incidence and prevalence is so high. And it's weird because you live it, right? You read it in a study, you discuss it, and you're like, this is me. Like, this is literally, especially if you're a student of color and you're first generation, then it's even, the health outcomes are bleak.
That's a good question, man. And I was hoping somebody would ask it because it's a very important one, how do we, basically I'm going to answer to maybe a part of your question, which is how did I navigate graduate school as a Latino in a predominantly white institution? This was the single most hard thing about graduate school for me. The finances were really hard. The reading, the academic thing, there was a lot of challenges. But the thing that was the most challenging for me is that I was invisible, None of the readings that we were doing talked about my experience as a Latino, or South American or Argentinian, right? None of the professors, right, knew what it meant to be an immigrant. And I was in an education program. Education and immigration, it should be talked about together, right? And I was doing a PhD program and nobody talked about it except one professor who was my advisor. So one out of the 16 classes that I took, right? And that was driving me crazy. It was driving me crazy, right? Because you feel like, I bring all of this knowledge about immigration, and every time I make a comment in class, people will be like, oh, that's interesting, and then change the subject, right? And talk about things about education that are, assume a white middle class experience. And I did not grow up, in the middle class, right? So that's one of the reasons that I thought that I was going to quit, right? Because I was in a space where I didn't feel like I was being heard, right? Fortunately, I decided to do, for my own sanity, a research project that represented exactly who I was and what my experience was, right? Which was how, being undocumented in the United States and what it meant. And I faced a lot of, a lot of hostility because of this. Like the professors in the program didn't want to approve my research. I had to do a lot of creative things. I had to fight with people. Like I ended up alienating most of my professors, right? But I had that one mentor who stuck by me through all of this and made it work, right? And I still have that anger I graduated 6 years ago and I've been a professor 5 years, right? And that I developed that thick skin, and I have the training of, I got trained in Boston College, which was where I did my PhD, at being really good at having to fight if I need to fight, and getting angry about and passionate about what I do, because I had to every day, right? And now I use that anger, I use that knowledge in my classes, right? I'm really grateful I'm not in an institution like that right here, but it's kind of the same. I'm in faculty here. There's 40% Latinos students and there's 5% Latino faculty, so there's not a lot of diversity in terms of faculty. So that is a strength, right? That depression that I had, that craziness that I faced in navigating academia as a person of, as a Latino, a person of color, or undocumented, I'm glad that I was able to pass and to graduate it with the support that I had, and I use it every day in my teaching, and I'll use it forever in my life, right? Because it taught me, right, to be strong and to, and I enjoy now that I'm able to teach, first generation students, Latino students, Asian American, African American, white students about that struggle, So I don't know if that answered, but I got something out of my chest.
Can I?
Yeah. I'll speak for
So
myself too.
it's an awesome question.
Yes.
And like Julian, right? There was days that I was like, oh my God, I'm not gonna make it. This is crazy. So again, I was really the only Latino in the program, and I really felt that way after actually Federico left, and I was like, oh,
I got another
man.
job.
And I was like, oh man,
Abandon him.
my mentor is gone. And so, but what really helped me at least, backstory, was that, I used to wrestle in high school. So I was a wrestler in high school. I still coach wrestling. But I was a wrestler in high school, and there's a phrase in wrestling that says, once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And it's true, because once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. Although getting a PhD was not easy. So, but I remember the first day that I got into UT, I had a professor, in the elevator told me that I essentially wasn't going to make it. And so, and you
Wasn't me.
And it was not you. So you may hear those things, and the important thing to remember is like it's important to develop a thick skin and kind of use that as fuel for your fire. I can't curse except because I'm being recorded, but it's fuel for your fire, like a chip on your shoulder sort of thing. Use that as fuel. I'm going to prove you wrong. And so it's important to use that sort of stuff, the negative feedback that you get, as fuel, as opposed to placing it on my back. Oh, I'm going to give up because this person thinks I'm going to give up. And so you got to use that stuff as fuel, and yeah, passion, make it drive you to finish. And like Julian, I'm kind of still angry about it in some ways. It's but it's a good question, and something, if you guys ever decide to become professors, is something to bear in mind. You're going to have students come to you and tell you that they're having some sort of mental health issue, and maybe even they're having suicidal thoughts. So, just be prepared for that. We were never trained for that when I was at UT Austin, but it seems to be happening more and more.
We are trained to guide them to the right, hopefully
the
right place.
Or give them good advice, but it's just keep that in mind that as future professors, this could happen.
I'll speak for me. Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Well, I am trained in suicide. like assessment, because I'm in the master's here actually for social work. So kind of like going back to that, like, yeah, there's not that many Hispanics or minorities in our classes, but it's also like looking at you are like paving the way for other people. So it's like you might be the only one, but then next year there might be like 2 or 3 more. So instead of like having that negative thought or like that thought, just like restructuring it into a more positive one. So like don't let yourself like, you know, put down like you like it's more of an empowerment version. So it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not like I'm the only one here, or people don't really understand me. But then that's fine because you're like, you know, you got in the program, so there's gonna be more, you know, more people coming after you. So it's kind of like just seeing it as you're like a leader for your like, you know, and just teaching people about your culture.
I think it's really hard too because it's like if you're the first one in your family, and I'm a graduate assistant for the Allied Health Academy, and what we do is we support students of color into the allied health professions here on campus. So it's a systematic change to kind of like bounce back against all the barriers and loopholes that are already in the system. But it's just like you hit a point where you kind of like you surpass your family in their education, in their perception of the world, in their how they navigate the world, and that's just to me. I've always thought of that experience as that moment where you realize that you are far beyond what they'll ever be able to comprehend. That's a very bittersweet one because you're like I read a quote and said like your success is predicated on the sacrifices made of those who came before you. And so it's a very, I don't know, I just feel like the higher you go up in education, it's like you said before, it's very isolating.
It becomes a dual identity, and I talk about this all the time with my students and about myself, and I'll speak for myself. When I arrived to NYU, you know, I actually had to go through therapy. I sought help, and because I was just to give you an understanding of my program, I was the only Latina, the only person that ever came from a CSU, a public school. Most of my peers had gone to like Harvard, Princeton, all the others, and then there was only an African American in my program. Everybody else was white or Asian from like the elite circles back in Asia. So it was very difficult because it was nothing that I've ever experienced. And so also being in New York City, the weather gets really, really bad. And I wasn't prepared for that. And so I remember I made a friend who looked Latina, Mexican, and her name is Eshna. She's also actually from Bangladesh. And till this day we joke about it because I was immediately just like, it was like a magnet, like, oh, she's brown, I gotta talk to her. And then I go and introduce myself and I can't even pronounce her name. I was like, oh shit, she's not Latina. And we became best friends. I literally just went to her wedding last year. But my point to this is that, so I'll say what it did for me because I was angry, but also I was very afraid and very uncomfortable being the only everything and not that the one with the attractive opinions about immigration or about Mexicans or about, you know, because I took a class, immigration class, and when you talk about an immigration issue, you are talking about Mexicans, and I'm Mexican, you know. So don't be afraid to be the unpopular in the room. Don't be afraid. And you will find that it will be scary. But I am very grateful that my experience through graduate school in New York City gave me the thickest skin, because it did. It was isolating, but I was very okay with being depressed. I understood, I remember this so well, I can tell you. I was very depressed in my apartment, and my Eshna came into my house and she said, "You're depressed, it was very dark, it was snowing, it was nasty," and she took me out for a run. And it was the best in Central Park, because I lived across the street from Central Park. I was very grateful to actually, I was at 103rd Central Park West. So my backyard was Central Park, and it was the best run. I can tell you to this day, I get the chills. I knew that feeling of running. I cried through my run. I can cry now. And it was just so, I was unpacking. I was like, oh, this is me. And I'm in a place where I don't belong, and I'm reminded every day that I don't belong, and that I'm reminded that I am different, but I am good. I deserve to be here. And I was very fortunate to really have a good group of friends that became very, you know, my tribe, and they got me through a lot. So I would say accept that you are different, accept that you are the first generation student there, accept depression. It is real, but seek help. My therapist was amazing, and when you don't, you gotta find the right therapist too. So please make sure that you try different ones if you don't feel like it's, it's not setting well, and talk about it with people that are willing to listen, and connect with people back home, because I always connected with people back home too.
The common denominator, and I have my own stories that you've brought back memories of. The common denominator from these stories and what I can share with mine is that you do not isolate yourself. You find someone somewhere who you can connect with so that you can have what I've called parallel lives. Not schizophrenic, different, although sometimes it feels like that, but of what the institution requires of you for your degree and that which you think is the best for you. And it's challenging, but when you've mastered both, you've taken a quantum leap in your life. Deep breath. Means a lot to say that. From a small town in San Germán, I leave my family behind and I go to the University of Puerto Rico, the flagship university of Puerto Rico, and am not from the rich kids, which most of them go there. So there I am. That's not my, okay, yes it is, it's my wife calling. Just 1 second, estoy dando mi presentación, te hablo ahorita, besito. Sorry. Just said hello. It's a difficult process to not be one, either of my back home kids who are getting married when they finish high school, or maybe 1 or 2 years and having kids before they even finish college. I'm over there on my own, but I had a circle of support that validated, and this is what I wanted to study, this is what I had to do with the institution, and when I go on to do the master's, my uncle says to me, go on and be a lawyer, I'll pay for your studies. The social work school paid for my full scholarship if I wanted to do social work. I said, no, I want to do journalism on my own. That meant working nights and whatever it was, because that's what I wanted to do. Parallel processes. Then I go to Wisconsin, where I'm one of the few, if anything, up there, Latino minority. Great funding for that, but isolated. And here's a little story. At one point, I had either 5 or 6 incompletes. You don't do that when you're in grad school. Well, I had 2 things that helped me through. A psychologist who told me, don't isolate yourself. Go to the meetings with the other folks who don't like you, but just be there. Chit-chat if you can, instead of isolating yourself. So they're talking about sports. Learn who won the game and be at least knowledgeable about it and say something. I'm making this up. I don't remember all the things that she said. But it was the sense of do not isolate yourself while you have a parallel support system that's not at that institution where you're studying, but somewhere that is supporting you, and I did have them. It made a world of difference. I did finish each of the incompletes. I don't know why they didn't kick me out, because they saw value. There were people that valued what I was trying to do. And I was against the grain, as my work was political economy of media in a school that's very quantitative survey research, and I'm looking at the structure of media, and then going into being the only one studying Latinos, media, and politics at a school that doesn't even know what that is, and I didn't know either back then. But it was the parallel approach. They want me to learn statistics, they want me to learn these theories, I'll do so. I have the support system that then allows me to continue being a Puerto Rican, which I never stopped being. Then I had the family, the life, whatever, and I had support system, and I had crises at those levels. And never wavered in each of those that allowed the balance to finish and become successful. Here's where I have to share one story of not giving up. When I had those 6 incompletes, my daughter was not that long after she was born. And I was going to the office we had a research center, and I was going to the research center, working for an hour, getting blocked because I wanted to do that linear puzzle, and then stopping and then watching TV until 2 o'clock in the morning, then going back home. My wife would go off to work. I'd take care of the little one until she came back from work around noon. And then I'd go back to the office and repeat the cycle and not get much of anything done. This is a turning point in my life. I'm watching TV, and there's this talk show host talking to a psychologist who used to be the psychologist for the movie stars and the Hollywood famous. But now she's doing talk shows on radio and getting called and telling people how to help with their lives. And I'm listening to this on TV, and the interviewer is asking her, well, what's the difference between those Hollywood folks and the people you're talking to over the phone on radio? She says, there's nothing. I mean, of course there's a difference between them. Well, all of those Hollywood famous have their insecurities about why anybody would buy a record from them, go to their movies. They think they're ugly, although they may be lovely. They have something. They're always concerned about something. They have their fears, their insecurities like anybody else. But wait, they're succeeding. What's the difference? Once they set a goal, they don't give up until they achieve it. My goal was to get the PhD. Bingo. What do I have to do? Little pieces of the puzzle until they come together. And I did so. With a parallel process, a support system. I didn't isolate myself. And I didn't give up. And that was the first lesson that I mentioned to you about finding who and what you are and not giving up and finding those connections. And I'm going to have one other concomitant piece of advice because there are many more stories. But here's a book, reading, because all along, when I was a student in Puerto Rico and all along, I've read on self-help and self-development. There are dozens of books out there that give you guidance on how to do these things. I could give you names, titles of numerous stuff, and My Crisis in New York, which that was when I went to New York and then left New York and then went back to no job and whatever else. There's other crises. I'm not going to go there. But there were books. But here's one book, one lesson from one book titled Seat of the Soul. Seat of the Soul. And of all the things that book, and some of these books took me into metaphysics, which I studied and immersed myself in as I did into astrology and astronomy and many other things. But this book in metaphysics has one lesson that, if you can think about it for your life, will be another turning point for you. Do not fill the void of the unknown with fear. I'll repeat that. Do not fill the void of the unknown with the emotion of fear. Yes, you're going to be afraid of many things that you don't know about, but what you do with that unknown is fill it with knowledge. But don't speculate on, oh my God, I'm going to fail. Oh my God, this is awful. You hear a noise, and instead of, you hear a noise and say, what might it be? You don't know the answer to something. What do I have to do to achieve that? But to have a sense of panic, of emotion, you're filling that little space of your brain, those molecules in your brain, with an emotion that paralyzes you from doing other things, of gathering and filling the unknown of the fear, the space of the fear, that unknown, instead of filling it with fear, filling it with the knowledge that will move you forward. It was a life changer when I read that because, folks, I can go into numerous things of being unemployed, which I have been, retiring with not knowing what's going to happen, many other things. But instead of being emotionally buried with fear, I'm conspiring to overcome the unknown. And that applies to everything that you do. What to do for the exam, how to study for the readings, what to do, how to deal with a patient, what to do with my life. I'm the only one here. God, what am I going to do? No. Where do I have to gather the knowledge? Oh, here's this book that will help me. Here's a friend I can talk to. I can write a journal in which I just open your computer, start. These are my emotional moments now. Let me empty that. Get it out of your system. You're doing something that is not thinking of the worst case scenario. I gave this talk to some colleagues for fellowship a few years ago, and one of them comes to me and says, Federico, my dean called me to the office, and I spent the whole weekend speculating that I was going to get fired, I was going to get this, all the awful things. I spent a horrible weekend. Then I get there and he says, you're doing a great job, here's some ideas for us to work on. He wasted the weekend speculating with fear on the unknown. He could have gone to a movie, gone to jog. Don't do that to your life, because when you do not let that fear fill the unknown, you're conspiring to have plan A, plan B, plan C. There was a riot at my university when I was a student, and a photographer took a picture of everybody running. I was standing on a chair, looking up. Where are they running from and why? That was the picture that came up in the newspaper. My family was saying, no, there's a picture of you. I said, well, I wasn't running not knowing where or why. I was like, what's going on? Okay, if it's coming from that direction, now I know I have to go there. Whatever. That was before I read the book. It's just an example of how to deal with the unknowns of your life. I've talked too much already. But anyway, I had to share that one.
Any final questions? Thoughts?
More questions, please, for any one of us.
I have already began to contact professors.
Yes.
And we've had phone conversations, but at the end, when they ask me if I have any questions, I had a really tough time coming up with questions to ask them about the program that aren't already on the website. What would you consider a good question to ask to show that I am really interested?
So you're looking for PhDs?
Yes.
Ask a professor. Well, ask them about their research. You already know what they research, so you're not going to ask them, what do you research? You looked at some of the articles, so you ask them questions about their research. Other good questions about a graduate program is there opportunities for me to teach?
Okay.
Is there opportunities for me to do, what kind of research opportunities there are?
Yeah, I would ask also, how many people get funded through the years, how many opportunities for funding, and how many students get it. Do they recruit a lot of out of state, in state? The friend I mentioned, Ashna, she actually, that's another thing, and it's a little bit related. She applied to the PhD 3 times, so again, don't get discouraged if you don't, because she got rejected once. She got in once without funding, and the third time was charmed. She got funding, and it was what she wanted. So I would just ask, questions about, the application process. How tough is it? How many people get it?
What do graduates of this program go on to do?
Right. And what's the model, right? So like Julian said, do you have to teach for 2 years? Or how many years do you have to teach? How does the funding look like? Also, because it may be that you have to teach the whole time.
Thank you.
I don't know if you have other.
What do you like most about your job?
What makes you don't say what makes you tick, but what's your motivation for your job? Why have you stayed there? You're asking them to relate a personal story that their answer tells you more than than the words that they just said. It relates the meaning that they have for what they do. If they don't answer, they're telling you a lot already. But if they do answer and it connects, it resonates with you, continue.
One last question. Other professors that have similar interests that they work with? So in other words, ask them who else within the department should I talk to So try to get to know as many people within the department as you possibly can. And
You're gonna
building.
spend 5 years with them, you know,
Yeah.
so I've
Build
had
some-
relationships that have lasted less than that.
Yeah.
Most, if not all, so it's a long-term relationship.
Yeah, and kind of what kind of community is there for PhD students in your field, and is it really competitive, or do they help each other? Because that does matter, you know, in a way.
Your mentors are not gonna be necessarily at your department or your
Mhm.
school. My mentors at Wisconsin were not at the school where I studied. They were at agricultural journalism a few blocks away, and in history, and in sociology. But I had the parallel process. They want me to learn this, I'll learn it. They're the people who are valuing what I'm doing and what I want to do. Finding out about those others. You had a question?
It's for engineering again.
I'm sorry?
It's for engineering again. We have an option to either take the comprehensive exam, go for a project, or go for a thesis. So if you're looking at a PhD program in the future, thesis would make better sense, but I just want to know if taking a comprehensive exam or project will affect that decision.
My experience as advisor and evaluating proposals, even for the PhD programs, a comprehensive exam shows how much you studied for those questions that you're going to be asked. A thesis tells the reader of your research capabilities, if that's what you want to do. If you've developed an interest in some project and you want to show, then you have the literature review, you establish your research methods, you show how you develop the data that you gathered, how you answered the question for that. That is telling a story about you, not just that you could answer these questions on a literature, regurgitation of some literature for an exam.
Yeah.
Some schools don't care. Others value that you've done your own work.
Thank you. And call up those institutions that you're interested in and ask, you know, is it typically students who, is the thesis important? I mean, maybe you can ask some, you know, I always say, call institutions and see if you can get in contact with the a current PhD student there. That's also a very good perspective if you want to get, you know, so I would definitely try to get information through that, because I know engineering is a little bit different.
Thank you.
Any final questions?
More
thoughts?
questions?
We are running at it.
Is it necessary to, while applying for PhD, you must have 2 or 3 research papers published per year?
Some places, some disciplines, it helps. Some places, some disciplines, it doesn't. Find out what is required where you'd like to study.
It definitely doesn't hurt.
It never hurts.
If you can, if you're part of a research team, even if you're second, third, fourth author, all the better. Again, it shows that you were part of a research project.
When you're applying multiple times and some time goes by, do you have to update your letters of recommendation, statement of purpose? Like, how long can you wait?
So, yeah, you should, especially if, like, let's say you apply to different schools every time, I would update them. So oftentimes you can even contact the same professors, but.
I would say that no statement of purpose looks the same.
Okay.
If I'm applying to Boston College, it's gonna be look one way.
Right,
If I'm
tailored
applying
to the
to
program.
UCI, it looks a different way.
Very important.
And I applied to 150 jobs before I got this one.
Wow.
And so I have 150 different statements of purpose, all saved in my computer.
And when you have a generic letter, and then you just change, let me scratch that. When you tailor those statements of purposes and letters of interest and whatnot, be sure that you carefully edit out the other institution's name when you change it for the new one.
Because you've seen letters like that.
I've done that. In the last sentence, I forgot to change, yes, I'd be delighted to, whatever at your place, and I forgot to change that one, which I used for the other one. Of course, I never got a call back from those.
But this help. The Career Center, you can work with a specialist in, computer science and engineering, and that will do draft after draft after draft. Your statement of purpose is a live document. It breathes, it changes with your mood, it changes with where you're applying, it changes with the last internship that you did, it changes whether you're focused more on research and on teaching. So that's something that you keep on working on. It's never, it's never this is the one. It's always something that you work on.
But here's a
and have
template.
somebody look at it.
Yeah, and that was the same.
It is,
Never,
it is.
ever, ever send anything out, ever, before at least 4 pairs, 4 people looking at it before. Never. That's a golden rule.
This is not a template, but here's something. As in any letter of application for any job, a statement of purpose should say, the first paragraph, do not start, my name is so-and-so. Okay, do not start any letter of application or any statement of purpose as my name is so-and-so, and I'm a student. That is a given in your CV. That is a given in your signature. The purpose of this letter is to. What drives me to apply to your school is because of 1, 2, 3. First thing, second thing, third thing. The very next paragraph starts with the paragraph on the first thing that you're talking about. The second paragraph is that second thing that you said in that last sentence of the first paragraph. The third paragraph addresses the third point that you made. In conclusion, your school is the ideal one because, as you see, it matches what I want to do with what you do and whatever else. Along the way, you mentioned the name of a professor who does that work in your field, and you've read their work, and you're interested in doing these things that apparently it's the match. That first paragraph is the roadmap. The rest of the paragraphs are following what you said in that first paragraph, and then you wrap it up, concluding with that. Same thing for a letter of application anywhere you go. I'm interested in working with your company because given what I read, I think I can be the ideal candidate given my research, my teaching, my perspectives of life in terms of the research. Here's the first paragraph, the teaching, the second paragraph, the purpose of life, the third paragraph. I'm making these other particulars up, but these are the said 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or if it's just 2, whatever it is, you state it in the first paragraph, you document it in the rest of the paragraphs, you bring it all together in the end. And it matches. Oh, it flows. My letters are read by more than 2, 3 people before I send them out for some things. At this stage. Still do that. You've taken a long time. I want to congratulate each and every one of you for being this far in your careers, in your lives. If you're here, it's because you have a purpose for something great in your life. And all you need is the support to guide and guidance to achieve that. So find those people who will help you achieve those things. There are lots of folks around and you may not know them, but they're there. You've got to search. Throw the arrow to the wind and be ready for those things. Just be ready, be open. Read the book Zen and the Art of Archery. That was one that I read when I was Zen and the Art of Archery, not motorcycles. That might be a good one too. And here, there was a time when I was doing my master's. My last year of college, then my master's. My hair was down to here. I had a beard and I had a motorcycle. When the hair started getting gray and whatever. No, I didn't. That didn't last long. The motorcycle lasted longer than the hair. But anyway, it was just different in success because of parallel lives that one develops. Not schizophrenic. It felt like that again. But it's the parallel lives and One last. This is another one. From the monk who sold his Ferrari. Another book. The monk who sold his Ferrari. You read that?
Yeah.
Cool. 2 lessons from that. A cup is like the time of your life. If you fill it with lots of little things, lots of little pebbles, when you have the major goal of your life, it's full of little pebbles, it's not going to fit. Start filling your cup with your main item, and then whatever space is left, whatever time is left, for the other things that make you happy. But start with the main one. Number 2, the story of the 2 monks who are vowed to silence, and they get to the crossing in the river, and there's a lady that's crying. Now these are monks who are vowed to silence. They're not supposed to talk. But one of the monks sees the lady crying. He says, "Ma'am, what can I do to help you?" And she says, "The river current is too strong. I cannot cross it on my own." This monk holds her on her back, crosses her, leaves her on the other side of the river, and the 2 monks keep all the way miles after. The monk who crossed the lady sees the other guy fuming. "Brother, what bothers you? You're supposed to be vowing silence, and look what you did." The monk who carried the lady says, "I left that baggage," not that he was saying the lady was a baggage. "I left that charge at the crossing of the river. Why are you still carrying it?" That happens with senses of anger, senses of disillusion. Don't carry them beyond the crossing that got you there, because it'll restrict how free you will be to do many other things in your life. And you're all vowed to succeed when you put yourself to it. So.
Close.